Which came first, the chicken or the egg? As students at Hampton High School, a school with a tradition of excellence, I'm sure you've spent countless hours pondering this exact question. However, you've probably not answered it, as it has baffled scientists and philosophers alike all throughout human history. We really have no way of knowing at this point, but with regards to humans, I would argue there's a more important question to be asking, and that is, what connects the chicken and the egg? For that, we turn to estrogen. So what is estrogen? Estrogen is a term that describes a group of three hormones found primarily in women that share a common four-ring backbone: estradiol, estrone, and estriol. Estradiol, whose formula is C18H24O2, is by far the most common estrogen produced during the reproductive years and possibly the most important, as it affects the body's estrogen-specific receptors the most. Estrone, whose formula is C18H22O2, is the second most common estrogen, but unlike the other two, it is made primarily in the adrenal glands, not the ovaries. Estriol, whose formula is C18H24O3, is known as the estrogen of pregnancy because it is barely detectable in the bloodstream when a woman is not pregnant. So that's all well and good, but it doesn't really tell us why estrogen is so important. So let's take a look at what it does. When a woman is pregnant, she will produce more estrogen in those 9 months than she will throughout the rest of her life. And during these 9 months, estrogen plays a hugely important role in increasing blood flow and transferring nutrients to the developing fetus. As many of you also know, though, estrogen does a whole lot more during puberty in making someone, as the great Shania Twain would say, feel like a woman.
Man, I feel like a woman.
It does this through the formation of secondary sex characteristics in females, such as more permanent hair, like these luscious locks, enlarged breasts, wider hips, shorter bones, shorter vocal cords, and the regulation of the menstrual cycle, which is explained in the following video.
The menstrual cycle begins as the pituitary gland at the base of the brain secretes follicle-stimulating hormone. FSH stimulates growth of follicles in the ovary, one of which, the Graafian follicle, will carry a mature egg. The pituitary gland also secretes luteinizing hormone, or LH, which stimulates the ovaries to produce estrogen. Estrogen thickens the lining of the uterus. As estrogen levels rise, FSH secretion falls, and LH secretion surges. High levels of LH cause the mature egg to be released from the Graafian follicle, which in turn produces more estrogen and progesterone, building up the lining of the uterus in preparation for receiving a fertilized egg. If fertilization does not occur, increased levels of progesterone and estrogen eventually inhibit the production of LH and FSH, which in turn causes estrogen and progesterone levels to fall, and menstruation begins.
One of the best things about estrogen, though, is that its effects are not just limited to puberty. It plays a vital role in maintaining the skeletal, cardiovascular, and brain health of women. In the bones, estrogen promotes osteoblast activity, which are cells that are responsible for depositing minerals like calcium and magnesium into bones. This is why women who have low estrogen levels are at a high risk for osteoporosis, which is a weakening of the bones. In the cardiovascular system, estrogen increases HDL, which is good cholesterol, while decreasing LDL, which is bad cholesterol. And it relaxes and smooths blood vessels, which allows blood to flow more easily. It also soaks up free radicals, which are particles in the bloodstreams that damage arteries and veins. In the brain, it is thought that estrogen impacts how brain cells communicate and how the brain is structured. It also promotes serotonin production, which is a mood-balancing neurotransmitter. This is why women who have low estrogen levels are at a high risk for depression. For more information on how estrogen impacts the brain, let's take it to Dr. Larry.
Estrogen is extremely important for a woman's mental health. And the reason why is estrogen is needed to balance neurotransmitters in the brain. The neurotransmitters determine our brain speed, how we coordinate things, how we function. If your estrogen levels are low, your neurotransmitters will be out of balance and you will have trouble concentrating. You may have insomnia, you may forget where your keys are. So by checking your estrogen level and balancing that, you will actually improve your memory and brain function.
If you recall correctly, the video explaining the menstrual cycle described how estrogen production is done in concert with the release of an egg from the ovaries. At one point in a woman's life, though, typically between the ages of 45 and 55, her ovaries will stop releasing eggs and therefore produce less estrogen. This is called menopause. This decrease in estrogen can cause the following symptoms: less frequent or no menstruation, hot flashes, insomnia, night sweats, headaches, irritability, anxiety, depression, and aching joints. Such a sudden hormonal change is certainly shocking, but there are ways to treat it, which we will get to later. Now, let's take a look at how estrogen does its job at the cellular level. First, estrogen is able to enter the cell with relative ease because its 4 carbon rings make it a steroid hormone, which is fat soluble. Once it is in the cell, estrogen's target destination becomes the nucleus, whose phospholipid bilayer once again allows it to pass through. Once in the nucleus, it cannot do anything until it binds to an estrogen receptor. After this binding occurs, though, the estrogen-estrogen receptor complex is able to attach to the DNA at specific gene locations, which will code for different types of proteins depending on the cell type. Here, the complex will unzip the DNA, and RNA transcriptase, an enzyme, will initiate transcription where DNA is turned to RNA and RNA to proteins. These proteins will then bring about the physical changes that are experienced throughout the body in different organ systems. Now that we know how estrogen works, the next logical step is to look for ways to use estrogen in medicine, and there are 2 primary ways this is done: birth control and hormone replacement therapy. Birth control, whose name is self-explanatory, works by stopping production of follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which are hormones responsible for driving ovulation that are produced in the pituitary gland. However, this feedback system allows birth control to be prescribed for a range of other things, from regulating the menstrual cycle to reducing the risk of ovarian cancer to even reducing severe hormone-related acne. In hormone replacement therapy, estrogen is used alongside progestin to manage the symptoms of menopause. It achieves this by bringing the levels of estrogen back up to normal after they drop. In postmenopausal women who have had their uterus removed, however, simply prescribing estrogen instead of estrogen and progestin can also prevent osteoporosis and colon cancer. If you do not wish to use synthetic estrogen treatments, there are foods that also contain estrogen imitators called phytoestrogens. They have the unique ability to increase and decrease estrogen levels, which enables them to reduce the risk for cancer and improve menopausal symptoms. Phytoestrogens are very similar in shape and chemical makeup to estrogen, so the body's estrogen receptors treat them the same as estrogen. For this reason, they are called endocrine disruptors. They include cruciferous vegetables, soy, berries, grains, nuts, and fruits. Phytoestrogens. Given its broad range of effects, it is no wonder that estrogen is being considered in treating many different ailments. Perhaps none more important, though, than its potential with Alzheimer's. In Alzheimer's disease, protein buildup between nerve cells results in loss of cognition and in memory. Today, however, estrogen is looked to as one of the best molecules for the prevention or modification of Alzheimer's. One reason estrogen could prevent Alzheimer's is because it protects central nervous cells from harmful stressors like oxidative and inflammatory proteins. Additionally, estrogen helps maintain the membrane potential of the mitochondria, which in turn prevents cells from initiating apoptosis or programmed cell death. Another way estrogen can be used in the future is to undo the loss of muscle strength that postmenopausal women experience. A 2011 study reported that women who received an estrogen-based hormone therapy experienced less proportional muscle loss than those who did not receive treatment. A possible explanation for this is seen in that estradiol works through estrogen receptors in skeletal muscle. This could then increase the number of myosin fibers that are attached during a muscle contraction, which would equate to more force generated in a contraction. Once again, this shows how estrogen can be used to combat the symptoms of menopause.